Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Triple F podcast, Faith and Family First. My co-host Jim Hochberg and I are going to delve into elections in Hawaii, what that's going to look like in 2022, how we got here, and what may be coming up in the near future. So let's chat about that. Welcome to the show once again, Jim Hochberg.
Let's do it.
Jim Hochberg, for those of our new listeners and viewers, and we have listeners on Kauai, KESU Radio, and right here in Oahu, we have K-Light, 1040 AM. Jim, for those that may not know who you are, we have forgotten to do this the last couple of shows. I want to just let people know that you are a licensed attorney practicing right here in the state of Hawaii.
I am. Have been for 38 years. I know I don't look old enough. Oh, well.
Well, so what I wanted to do is just remind people that's why you get all giddy when we start talking about anything law related, because it is so you do, Jim.
Well, I never noticed.
You're like a little boy. You're like, oh, and then of course you get into the weeds sometimes, and then I'll get the emails and phone calls from people that are like, Jim, when he gets on a roll, and I'm like, yes, I know. I've worked with you many, many years. So.
Decades. Oh, no, couldn't be. You're not that old.
So the legislative session has ended now. And of course, the next thing on everybody's mind is the elections that are coming up. And I don't know about you, but I've already gotten emails from people asking, is Hawaii Family Forum going to be doing the voter guide?
Which you are, right?
And we're going to do our best to do after the primaries are done. We will be doing that. Again, as we mention, every time we talk about that, we understand that not every candidate will return our survey, but that's okay.
No, but that's because they don't want to answer the questions, or maybe they're too busy. But you always put the candidate's phone number, and we urge the people holding your survey report without an answer from a candidate, if it's in your district and you have to decide to vote for that person or not, use the phone number, call them up, and ask them the questions.
And those millennials that are watching, and Generation X and Generation Y and Z and Q and everybody else who's coming up, we also have live links because we provide it in a PDF format. And so if somebody doesn't want to make a phone call, because I know the younger generations are not about making phone calls, they're about clicking links and doing research. We also make those links active for you.
But you see, if you want the candidates to answer the questions next time, they need to have so many phone calls asking over and over the same questions this time that they don't want to go through it again next time. And so next time they will answer, and then the people don't have to call them.
Absolutely. So looking at elections in Hawaii, we know that in 2020, Hawaii went to an all mail-in ballot system, to where all of those wonderful booths that people used to love going to and standing in lines and signing their names and showing their IDs to go and vote went away. And suddenly everybody who was registered to vote in the state of Hawaii was mailed a ballot. Now, I got to say, the Office of Elections did a somewhat good job of trying to educate people. We were in the middle of COVID, and people were afraid. There were people that were afraid to go out in public. And so, the Office of Elections did the very best they could in order to let people know that we were moving to this new way of voting. But what people, I would say most listeners understand that when a new law happens, it's because there was a legislative bill that was passed. And I know that you happened to look at the 2019 bill that created this.
Yeah, and one thing here, our audience needs to really understand, because in 2020, the end of February, beginning of March, there was this Chinese virus, and we got a lockdown, and states across the country were worried about how are we going to hold our election in 2020. We better do mail outs because it's COVID. And so it was big news everywhere. Everybody was getting mailed ballots. Afterwards, there was a lot of dispute as to whether people that weren't supposed to be voting were getting ballots and voting, whether people were getting multiple ballots and voting multiple times. That is not the case in Hawaii. What we have to realize is way before COVID, in fact, on January 24th, 2019, way before COVID, House Bill 1248 was introduced and passed first reading. Now, it went all the way through, and as we know, sometimes bills last 2 sessions, so that would be 2 years. It started in 2019 and it passed in 2020, but it passed in May of 2020, which was before most of the states across the country were doing the mail-in because of COVID.
And I'm curious, Jim, you have the printout in front of you. What was the vote? Was the vote bipartisan?
So in the
on the final
conference,
vote,
you mean?
On the final vote.
So passed final reading as amended, reported from the conference committee. Conference committee recommends it's passed. The votes in the Senate conference managers, 3 ayes.
No, the final votes.
1 no, and 0 excused.
No,
that was the conference. That was the
Yeah,
final vote.
I don't want the conference vote. I want the full chamber vote.
So the final reading as amended, CD1, 25 yeses in the
so
Senate.
Unanimous in the Senate.
House, Ward voted yes with reservations. Matsumoto Okamoto voted no, and there were none excused. So no, it wasn't bipartisan.
Okay.
And the interesting thing was, though, so then I grabbed the bill. But what I really want people to understand is ours was not because of COVID. Ours was because of what's in the bill. And when you look at what they said, as we've talked about before, the legislative findings at the beginning of the bill, which justify the change in the law but never becomes part of the actual change in the law, says some interesting things. So they looked at the 2014 primary election, and they said that was the first time more ballots were submitted before the primary election day than on that day. Before 2014, more were submitted on election day than before. 2014 was the first time in the primary that there were more submitted before early voting. Okay.
So absentee voting was what it was before. That's what it was called.
Okay. 56. Well, there was early voting too.
Yeah, but I know because
not mail-in. It was early.
No,
show
but
up.
I signed up for absentee voting, which meant that I was always mailed my ballot.
But
so I was one of those numbers.
Look at when they more than means 51%.
Right.
Okay. So then they say 56% of Hawaii voters chose to vote early during the 2014 primary. Approximately 83% of those 56% used mail-in. So I took out my calculator so I don't slip up in my math stuff. And 83% of 56% is only 46%. So less than half actually did mail in.
I don't know. I'd have to look at the numbers.
So
you have me so confused right now.
They're saying that in the Hawaii primary in 2014 was the first time more ballots were submitted before, but it really wasn't mail-in. That's the point. It was other than mail-in.
But they used that as the reason for...
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And so then they say in 2016, the number of votes cast before Election Day exceeded the number of votes cast at polling places on Election Day, except in one county. And they don't say what the county was. What if it was Oahu? Huh? Anyway, so this bothers me, this kind of nonsense. So then in 2018, they established a pilot program for the 2020 primary and general. And it was going to be used in counties with populations of less than 100,000. And they were going to do mail-in. So that's not Oahu. Okay? So that's why this bill was necessary for Oahu. So they said that they wanted to expand it because it would significantly reduce the logistical issues related to conducting elections at polling places. Okay, now we know why. There are logistical issues. People have to show up. There has to be parking. There has to be an open room that has to have voting machines. There have to be people to check in and check ID.
And the state is paying these salaries, right?
So then the question is, they should have asked the voters, what's more important to you? Election integrity, voting in person, or reducing logistical issues? If they would have asked me, I would have said, and I always do, I want logistical issues because I am more interested in election integrity, and I always vote in person.
Okay. Well, in any case, the bill obviously passed, and Hawaii went to the all mail-in system where everybody was mailed a ballot statewide. And right after the elections happened, there were some lawsuits against what happened, and so those particular lawsuits, we've moved on now. We're now in the 2020 cycle, and people are gearing up
2022
to 2022 cycle.
Yeah.
Yes, when people will be getting mailed their ballots.
But before you go into 2022, the law that passed in 2020 said the purpose of the act is to, and this is interesting, require the Office of Elections to submit a report to the legislature before the convening of each regular session of the legislature from 2020 through 2025 regarding the implementation of the election.
And they have
by mail. Have you seen any of the reports?
Yeah, the legislature, what they'll do is they'll send out their hearing notices, and one of their will be an informational hearing, and then they will have the Office of Elections.
So what are the issues that are on the agenda for those reports?
Like, I don't have them in front of me right now, so I can't answer the question. But the point is that the Office of Election is doing that. They are appearing before the legislature. They're providing the numbers. And in fact, in one of the hearings that I did watch, I know that the legislature was asking really tough questions about getting information into the hands of the voters so that people understood how the process was going to work, what if there were questions, and now moving to 2022, some of the things that have been brought up are now being implemented.
So I have a completely different reason to want to see the reports. There is a movement in Hawaii. I think it's mostly on Oahu, but I really don't know that, because it's also happening across the country, where because of the way the 2020 election went, where local Republicans won governorships, took over the legislatures, city councils, yet Trump lost. People are concerned about the integrity of the counting, and we've got all the video and all the stuff. There is a group of people here, and I'm not sure who they are because I haven't spoken to them, but I've heard about it through electronic communications, that want to have an audit of the 2020 election. So if the elections office is supposed to have given a report in January of 2021 to the legislature about how the 2020 mail-in election happened, that should all already be reported. And I can almost guarantee you, without having a shred of evidence, which I don't like to do, it probably isn't in the report.
So what we will do, listeners and viewers, is I'm going to try to go back in, because they always provide the information on these hearing notices. So anything that the Office of Elections was going to provide to the legislators, they will normally make available to people. I will get those copies, and I will make sure that maybe we'll do another show depending on what the information says. So keep that on your docket.
On another show, just so we mention it.
Right. So just know that we this is how we grow the show. You know, we talk about these things. We see these little pukas, and for those of you on the mainland that don't know what a puka is, it's a hole. So any kind of thing that has a puka in it, we're going to come back to. Okay. So, so just so that you know what's coming up for 2022. So June 7th, that's coming up, is the candidate filing deadline. So that means anybody in the state of Hawaii who wants to be a candidate running for office, you've got to have your papers in by that time. There's a couple of added dates after you turn in your paperwork on that deadline. Say you get sick or anything after that, then you can withdraw. But that's the day you have to have all of your papers in. And then on July 26th is when voters in Hawaii are going to start getting those ballots in the mail. Now, I know one of the concerns that a lot of people had, and that the Office of Elections did address to the legislators, were the questions of, how do I know that I mail in a ballot, that it's going to be counted? How do I know that you're going to get it, and that you got, that you did get it? People were very concerned about that. So the Office of Elections now has a link, which we're going to put on the bottom of the screen, and it'll also be in the resources on the bottom, so you can check your ballot, so you can follow through. After you send your ballot in, you can go and sign up online and check and see where it's at.
And you need to do that. And here's why. Part of that law from 2020 says, and this is section 11-D, subparagraph D, once a voter has returned a return identification envelope containing the secrecy envelope or secrecy sleeve with the marked ballot, that voter's ballot shall be deemed cast and may not be recast in the election. And there was news stories across the country of people trying to vote and being told they've already voted.
And Office of Elections here in Hawaii says that that cannot happen here in Hawaii because all of the ballots that you're mailed in, and I know that this to be true because I remember seeing it, there's a barcode that's on your ballot. And that same barcode is if you tried to, so you've sent your ballot and then you try to vote in person, that same barcode is going to come up and say that you voted. So that's what the Office of Elections is saying. The other thing that you want to do is make sure you go to the Office of Elections website, which is hawaii.gov/elections, because another link that you want to check out is they have a link on there is what's going to be on my ballot. So when you click on that link, you put in your name, your address, and it'll pull up what your ballot for your area is going to look like. So it'll have
there's good stuff.
So it'll have the names of the people that are going to be on your ballot. And Jim and I will do a show because our top viewed show to this day remains the constitutional amendment show that we did where Jim and I went through all the constitutional amendments and Jim gave his why you should vote yes or no, or how he gave you his little formula for how he comes up with how to say yes and no. And that to date is the highest ranked show we've ever done. So we will do that again. If there's any constitutional amendment questions, we will do that. And that'll be fun. We'll have fun to do that.
However, I think it's possible, notwithstanding what the clerk says about somebody voting your ballot, it's possible. Because I know people in Honolulu that got more than one ballot in the mail.
But this happened before. So
in 2020.
Yeah. So what happened is the Office of Election has done some cleaning up since the last election. So we are not going to say anything bad about the Office of Elections. In the sense, I mean, Jim and I are going to do what we always do. We're going to question to make sure that things are accurate because both of us are driven absolutely crazy when we're given an answer that doesn't make any sense or there's no way we can verify. So, of course, we're going to say that. Your vote belongs to you. And what you put on that ballot needs to be what is recorded. Correct. And you need to be responsible for that.
But that's why that track my ballot before, if I was going to vote by mail, but I'm going to vote in person, I would, before I submit my ballot, try to see if I'm already in there by tracking my vote. If it says your vote has been cast, somebody else cast your ballot. You
should. And for those of you that have someone, a kupuna in your family, someone elderly who may not be as akamai on the computer system, help them out. Make sure that you're helping them check their ballots because that is, we have to be honest. Not everybody is computer savvy. I mean, I know people to this day that are older that say, "Oh, I don't do YouTube." In fact, we have a viewer that loves the show very, very much, but she doesn't have access to YouTube. So she just hopes that when she's watching the television that we're going to pop up, and I just smile and
she's actually a nice lady. She talked to me at church several times.
So anyway, we want to make sure that we always have our kupuna on our radar as well. And then for those of you that absolutely want to vote in person, you can still do that. Now, it doesn't work the way that it did before. What they have now is they have voter service centers. And basically that means you can go in.
You have to go to City Hall if you're in Honolulu.
Yes, and you can vote in person.
But I'll see you there if you do. Because I'm going.
And they open on August 1st. The primary election here in the state of Hawaii is August 13th, which is a Saturday. So from the 1st until the 13th, you can go to these voter service centers and you can take your ballot with you. So you're going to still get it mailed. And then you'll go to these voter service centers and then you can go ahead and vote in person. And if you want to do that, then I say do that. We want you to vote. We want you to vote. And if that's what makes you feel comfortable, then we want to make sure you do that. So those are just some upcoming dates. And of course, as we move further into the election cycle, Jim and I will probably be having more conversations about that. Now, an interesting bill that moved through the legislature this past legislative session was Senate Bill 2162, which is a ranked choice voting, but only for special elections. And basically, that bill, I'll put the link in there. And basically, for a special election, what they want to make sure is that you can rank your choices. And then when the results come back, if somebody gets 51% or more of the vote, they are automatically elected. But if that doesn't happen, then what happens is the people with the less amount of votes, they get knocked off. And then the people with the highest votes. Now, what's interesting is Common Cause Hawaii and the Women League of Voters. They all of them testified in strong support of doing this, and it's supposed to work. I keep whacking this. The microphone is beating me up, Jim. What kind of gentleman are you? You're not even saving me from the microphone.
Dastardly. I'm absolutely dastardly.
I'm going to be knocked out by this microphone. Okay. Anyway, the point, people, is that choosing your ranking in voting, they say it's easy, and New York does it, and New York loves it, and they said that it didn't confuse voters. But when I walk in there, I don't want to say this is my first choice, and if they don't make it, then here's my second choice. First of all, we know this wouldn't work because in most of the races, it's just two people, a Republican running against a Democrat. And
the special elections aren't like that.
Right.
That's the thing. Special elections happen when a person in Congress dies. Special elections happen when, House or Senate members plead guilty to corruption and have to quit.
And that doesn't happen ever.
It did happen.
I'm being facetious.
That's why I had to think about what it really was, but that's what it really was.
And we have, and to be fair, this happens to both Democrats and Republicans in the state.
But usually the governor in Hawaii
issue.
Gets to appoint a replacement if it's his party for the short term until the next election or special election. So when you have special elections, remember Charles Dejoux served in Congress? He won in a special election. And then he never won again when it was a regular election. Special elections have more than just the primary winners going for a seat, and the vote gets split amongst all those candidates, and that's how Charles won. And he's never won since. So what this is going to do is change the Charles opportunity to win into something else. So I believe the biggest result of doing ranked voting is in Hawaii, we will only have Democrats in office at some point in time because Republicans won't be able to ever win. They'll either be the first choice or they won't be a choice.
So there are actually two comments that we had viewers ask questions on, and we wanted to make sure we get to these comments. They're about elections. The first one, Jim and I have been doing this so long that we actually could make either a meme, or if not a meme, we could write a song to make fun of this. But one of the questions is, so Eva, how do we get the questions on the constitutional amendments to make sense? And this year in this legislative session, there was a bill that moved. I don't know if it passed. I'll have to get back to you on this, but it was actually a bill that said that the questions on the Constitution Amendment should make sense. And if they have to make a law or if they have to write something, what does that tell you? If they actually
okay, so the best historical example of what goes on in the state of Hawaii with constitutional amendment language is, number one, we as non-elected people do not have any opportunity, like they do in California and other states, to put questions on the ballot the way we want them, because we write it, we get the people to sign the petition at this certain number of people on the list, and then we put on. We don't get that. So we only get to vote based on the language that the elected people give us. And so in 1998, I believe it was, we had a question on the ballot. Shall the legislature have the power to reserve marriage to opposite-sex couples? Now, all the other states across the country at the same time had constitutional amendments on their constitutions for their state voters, but most of theirs said something like, marriage shall be between a man and a wife, man and a woman only. We didn't get that.
And Hawaii Family Forum, our organization, paid a lot of money to educate the people in the community that a yes meant no and no meant yes.
I spent a lot of time with you
yes.
and
Yes.
Miss Rosati
Yes.
teaching
Yes.
about this.
Oh, and you know what? Even because when you're sitting in front of the ballot and you're saying to yourself, do I want this to happen or do I not want this to happen? And you have to spend more. This, I think this is human nature. If somebody can't make sense of it, they will leave it blank. And in the state of Hawaii, on a constitutional
blank vote is a no vote.
Is a no vote. So it may be a good constitutional amendment.
But we
However,
tend to like to vote yes on everything because we're so nice here.
Yes.
And we're going to do a show where I'm going to tell you why that's not a good thing to do.
Yes.
But we had another question about school board.
Yes. And so the second question, and we want to give a little shout out to William Strigel, who asked this question. He said, what would it take to change the way the Board of Education members are selected from nominated to elected positions? Is this even possible? And is it worth pursuing?
So we used to elect our school board members. In 2010, we changed the Constitution to allow the governor to appoint them. And the Senate, the governor nominates and the Senate
I have to say this because you say it all the time, but because it's so perfect right now. Elections have consequences.
They do.
So when you vote for a governor and he has the power to, or she has the power to appoint. Okay, go ahead.
And that's how we get our judges, from the governor's nomination and the Senate's ratification.
So think about that when you have your ballot for 2022.
When you're looking at governor, you need to realize judges, you got to realize school board members, the taxation structure, the public education structure.
And like him or not, one of the things that people appreciated about Trump was that when he got elected, he made a list of all of the people before he got elected.
That's when I actually became a Trump supporter, when I saw his Supreme Court list.
So that's one of the questions you can ask. If whoever the potential governor is that you're going to elect, that you want to check off their name and you have a chance to talk to them, find out what kind of people they'd be appointed.
And if they say something like really political, like, oh, well, I don't know, I'll do it at the time, or it's not a good idea for a candidate to do that, or anything, just answer. Your answer can be, well, but candidate Trump did.
Okay. So
just for fun.
Okay. So go back to your answer for Mr. Strigel.
So in order to be able to elect our members of the school board, we have to get the legislature to give us a constitutional amendment that says something that means we get to vote for our school board members again. And then we have to vote yes and pass it.
So stay tuned to the show because we've got a lot of good stuff coming up on the next shows. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe, you share, hit that notification button so you'll know every time we upload a new video. And don't forget to give some love to K-Light Radio and KESU Radio, and subscribe on Spotify and iTunes. And stay tuned. We love you. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.